I want to talk about Project Fear. I do. I know that sort of scares a lot of people, but if you cast your mind back a couple of years, 2.5 years to when we initially had the EU referendum, every forecast that the Remain side made was pretty much dismissed as Project Fear. Yeah, excuse me. Dismissed as Project Fear, and just to put things into perspective, I'd say about 90% of the things that George Osborne and David Cameron, the two instigators of this mess that we're in at the moment, said probably did turn out to be Project Fear. But in the grand scheme of things, two people with about as much common sense of how to run a country telling you what's going to happen to the country if this happens is about as reliable as, I don't know, your dead grandmother giving you forecasting the football results at the weekend. I mean, it's just with hindsight, the fact that we were told, let's have a referendum, and then we were told what would happen if we voted to leave by the people that called the referendum, who were two of the most incompetent buffoons to run this country since I've been born, beggars belief anyway. The stuff that's happened since. But yeah, Project Fear. Most of everything that Osborne and Cameron said turned out to be a load of rubbish, which is pretty much par for the course. However, let's just be really sort of fair about this, because this is what this is going to be about. This is about fair. Being fair about it, all of the things that David Davis, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, all of the Leave side, Michael Gove, etc., told us, has also turned out to be a load of bullshit. Their own version of Project Unicorn. David Davis famously said, and the quote is available everywhere on the internet if you want to go and look for it, it'll be as easy as anything to strike trade deals up with everybody. And it hasn't been. In fact, it's been anything but easy. And in fact, David Davis has pretty much pulled back and said completely opposite things to what he said 2.5 years ago, as have many of our ardent Leave campaigners. In fact, the only consistent one probably is Nigel Farage, but he probably doesn't have another tape. He probably only has the one cassette that plugs into the back of him. They probably never bothered about making any others. So whatever we were told 2.5 years ago is pretty much wrong, because in this amazing world that we live in at the moment, forecasting what's going to happen in 5 seconds is difficult enough, let alone forecasting what's going to happen in 2, 3, 10, 20 years. So I do agree in total principle with the Leave sort of Leavers' belief that it'll be all right in the end, and we'll muddle through and find some way of achieving it because we're British, I don't believe that it's going to be easy, because I don't really, the people who say, well, look about all these other countries that aren't in Europe that are doing fine. Well, up until this moment when you said they'll be doing fine, you couldn't give a shit about any other country in the world. Come on, be honest with yourself. I mean, the only time another country ever comes into the sphere of most people is either when they're going on a holiday abroad, or when they need someone to blame for something, or when they need to justify something. It's a bit like, I've said this before, but people who say, well, it must be true, I've read it in the newspaper, who the following day say, well, it must be bollocks, I read it in the newspaper. We are a contrary species, humans, and the internet makes us considerably more contrary. We were contrary back in the 1970s when all we had was television and newspapers. 2019, and we've got so many methods of ingesting information and opinion that the fact that people actually have singular, narrow opinions is actually quite a good thing. But Project Fear. The reality of Project Fear is it was probably true. Project Fear is legitimate. There is a reason to fear the leaving of the EU. There might be lots of reasons to think that it's a very, very good thing. And I'm not here to try to tell you that believing in leave or this, that and the other was wrong or this, that and the other. But all I am saying is I think some people may well find that they were a little bit forward in believing that everything that Project Fear said was a load of bollocks and there would be sunshine and unicorns over the next hill. I think it's very much a case of, now that we know what we're heading towards, there's a different kind of fear that's creeping in. It's not Project Fear, it's the reality of Project Fear, which is different, obviously, than the theoretical side of Project Fear. No, we haven't seen massive increases in prices. In fact, if anything, the country still seems to be sort of like plodding along quite nicely, if you want to believe what the Tories tell you. What you have to remember is, and what leavers have to remember more importantly than anything other, is the fact that we might have declared to leave the EU, but we're still in it. So the prosperity that we are, albeit tiny, that we are going through at the moment is still as a result of being part of the EU, who are, despite all of the criticisms of them, still doing reasonably well on the old trade front. Now, the reality of Project Fear boils down to a couple of examples that I've got for you. One of them is, if it was going to be so fantastic for all of these businesses, why are so many of them leaving? Why has Sony, after being part of this country's fabric since the Japanese moved here, decided to move everything to the Netherlands? Why have Jaguar Land Rover, which is about as British as you can possibly imagine, apart from the fact that it's owned by BMW, who are a German firm, Jaguar BMW is going to be moving out of the UK as well. And there are about 100 firms, 100 big firms. We're talking banking establishments, we're talking finance establishments, we're talking about the people who brought employment and prosperity to the UK are leaving. Now, Mr. Fanatical Leaver can turn around and say, but that gives opportunity to British companies. We can fill the gap. We can get the unemployed off the streets. And we've got more employment in this country than we've ever had before. So getting the unemployed off the streets isn't such a problem anymore, especially not with universal credit, where essentially somebody that 6 weeks earlier was perhaps unemployed themselves now sits behind a desk and determines whether or not somebody that can't breathe without an iron lung is fit for work, or if you turn up 2 minutes late for your appointment because the buses aren't running particularly well, you get docked 6 weeks' money. I mean, we have a fascistic benefit system now, and anybody that says, oh, they're all on benefits, they're all claiming this, that and the other, really probably wants shooting in the head. I know it's very extreme, and that's kind of what they're advocating. But seriously, if you think that claiming benefits in this country is easy, especially illegal immigrants coming over and collecting benefits, go and try to collect some benefits. Seriously, if you think brown yourself up if you think that'll help, or talk with a slightly European accent and go into your local job centre, say, I am from Russia, I need money, give me money. You walk a wheelbarrow out with it, because that's what universal credit is so easy for. You know, you've got loads of people who just go in there with foreign accents and walk out with a wheelbarrow full of money. Really. Yeah, that happens, doesn't it? 250 British firms have contacted the EU independently of all of Project Fear to find out whereabouts in Europe they could relocate to make sure that their profits and their company remains where it is today. 250. That's a lot of big companies, you know? And if we look at the amount of companies that, I mean, Dyson, I know Dyson's have had a factory in Singapore since 2004, but it was a production factory. It wasn't a management and business factory. It was basically James Dyson, Mr. English, Mr. British, has been getting his fantastic Hoovers being made cheaply by Malaysians for the last 15 years. And now he's decided that now that Singapore have got a free trade deal with Britain, and Britain won't have a free trade deal with, Singapore have got a free trade deal with the EU, and Britain soon won't have any kind of deal with the EU. It's better for his company to be in Singapore than it is in England or Britain. That's Mr. Brexit. That's, one of the hardline, we need to leave the EU because it's better for business. Well, it's not better for his business, is it? And ask yourself this question. Why has he done it? I mean, you can say, well, he's British, he's entitled to do it. But, you voted to leave the EU because people like this guy said it would be better for us. And people like this guy are moving their businesses to countries where it's going to be better for them. Not you, them. But, Project Fear. What about the stockpiling of medicine? We're getting a stockpiling of medicine in the country. They're actually, places have got more medicines than we've ever had. We've had for years to ensure that we can still get this stuff from the EU. Another thing is a lot of people in having cancer treatments, a lot of the radioactive isotopes, a lot of the things that they use to help cure them or make them better come from European countries. About 40% of women with breast cancer, basically the radioactive substances for chemotherapy and what have you, come from Germany. You can't keep these things in storage because A, they're dangerous, and B, they lose, they have to be kind of, they need to be fresh. But that's Project Fear. We'll sort something out, won't we? All these businesses leaving, so that means more opportunity for the rest of us. All of these medicines, well, it'll kill off a load of people, won't it? So we'll have less people who are sponging off the system. Because, I actually heard a right-wing kind of person suggesting that anybody with a terminal illness would probably become a Labour supporter, which suggests to me that A, that they acknowledge the fact that the Tory party don't look after people who are disabled, and B, are quite happy with the fact that the Tory party are not the party to have in power if you get a terminal or a potentially terminal illness. Look at antibiotics. Now, this isn't Brexit, although, to be fair, there is a link. We've been told, well, an expert has said, we need to educate the country about antibiotics. They've been saying this for a few years now, but now it's getting a little bit kind of, we really, really, really need to tell the people about antibiotics, because we are now getting people we're getting gammons, essentially, who get a bad cold, who are booking to go and see their doctors and are threatening or threatening not to leave their doctor's office if they're not prescribed antibiotics, despite the fact that they're being told by a doctor who therefore is an expert, but we don't trust experts anymore, but being told by a doctor, you have a cold. Antibiotics will not help your cold. But they insist on the antibiotics, they take them for a couple of days, and of course the cold will have got better in those couple of days anyway, but they think they've taken their antibiotics. So they don't believe their doctor, so they want now to, whenever they feel slightly bit poorly, they want antibiotics. And being told that antibiotics were building a resistance to it is Project Fear. Obviously, because they haven't got enough antibiotics for me, they should be making more. This is the level of ignorance we have with people. People who will not trust what a doctor says now because it doesn't fit with their way of thinking. Bit weird. Very, very cognitive dissonance, which seems to be something that is floating around the country and in the US, in a huge sort of swarm. It basically means refusing to accept that you're wrong. It is refusing to accept the blindingly obvious. So we've got to a situation in this country now where we are losing businesses hand over fist. We are stockpiling medicine. We have got an ineffective, paralysed government that can't decide, because half of the people, more than half of the people in that parliament, don't want to do a massive act of self-harm, because that's what they think Brexit will be. They think that if we do this, Brexit will finish us off. And there's a smaller percentage of MPs in there who think it's a great opportunity, or are telling you it's a great opportunity, until you have a look at their lists of their interests outside of the EU. And then you think, well, hang on a minute, Brexit might be good for you and it might be good for yours, but how is it actually going to be good for me at all? Project Fear has worked in the opposite way by banging on about how everything bad that might happen in this country won't happen. Now that bad things are happening, there are people out there who are putting positive spins on it. House prices are coming down. My kids might be able to afford to buy a house now. They might be if they have a job. But the point is, the whole point of this, and I don't want it to run over any more than it already has, because I didn't think it was going to get up to this, but it's very, very easy with this new technology to overrun my my usual sort of concise and precise ramblings. I actually think violent crime is on the rise. Crime is on the rise. Forget the fact that the Tories have slashed the police budget. They are the party for law and order, remember. They've slashed the police budget. We have homeless soldiers. We have ex-vets. We're vets. They're not ex-vets. If they were ex-vets, they'd be... We've got people who have worked tirelessly for this country that are being discarded left, right and centre. We have a divisional country where we've got sort of like 50% of them are leavers and 50% of them are remainers. I listened to a guy on the radio the other day saying he hasn't spoken to his mother for 2.5 years because of her almost fascist views about foreigners and about the EU. These things aren't going to change. You aren't going to change. You're not going to change anybody's opinion once they've made their mind up that this is the way forward. And I often say, and me and several friends have talked about this before, that perhaps the best thing that can happen to this country would be for us to crash out of the EU and discover just how bloody difficult it is for us to cope, to actually survive without the mechanism of globalization. I'm not a great fan of globalization, but the problem is the world has kind of become a globalized market. And if you fight that globalized market, what do? You end up teaming up with all of the other people that don't want to be part of that globalized market and make your own globalized market. It's a small world, really. It might be big. I might get pissed off having to travel 17 miles to go 3 miles, because that's the reality of where I live. But the point is it's a small world, and the Co-op have a delivery here every day. Small town in the middle of Scotland, but we get a delivery every day. I seriously worry about isolated communities like the one I live in, in the long term and the short term. I really think that Project Fear, which has been a popular sort of label for levers to throw at things, Project Fear is going to come back and bite us on the arse. And I'm not suggesting for a second that we should have a second referendum, we should decide to stay. It's like I said, I think we need to crash out. But I also think that what will happen when we leave the EU and things start getting really, really horrible is we will end up having a civil war. And it won't be on religion. It won't be on politics, really. It will be on leave and remain. It will be on, you've harmed me. Well, I don't care You think I've armed you, I'll arm you some more. We watch English people all the time. We know exactly what they're like. You know, they're belligerent, they're angry, and at the moment, they're both. They are that with the country, they are that with the politicians, they are that with their neighbours. We have got a lot of people in this country that are just genuinely angry. And they don't know what they're angry about, so they are just picking on random things that everybody else seems to be angry about. Trust me on this one. And I know that's everybody, but it ain't going to get better.